Hi there and welcome back to the OMB Law Board. I'm Simon from OMB Solicitors, and today I've got with me Lisa Harris from OMB. And Lisa, you've been with me 15 years, working with me day in and day out. We have a pretty good time doing it, don't we?
Yes, I think we respect each other really well.
Yeah. And predominantly you help me with a lot of my commercial stuff. And today I wanted to talk about some commercial leasing, so that our audience could get a bit of an insight as to what we go through when we do commercial leasing, because, there's all different types of commercial properties and industrial and retail properties. So, when our audience thinks about leasing, they don't see all those intricacies, and I thought we might drill down on a little bit of that today, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So when we get a lease, what's the first most important thing you're thinking about when we're drafting the documents?
Basically, what type of lease it is. Is it commercial, retail, a factory? Because that plays the most important part of what type of lease we're actually going to do,
Why is that important?
because they're all different. And
Okay.
people don't understand that, but every premises or property is different.
So the way you draft your lease is different depending on what you're leasing.
Correct.
Okay. So what's the difference between retail and commercial?
Commercial, it's not under the Retail Shop Leases Act, which means it's pretty standard, pretty straightforward. Whereas if it's retail, you've got the Retail Shop Leases Act, which is lessee disclosure statement, financial advice reports, all of those things, and timeframes.
Okay. So the Retail Shop Leases Act sets a whole lot of rules and minimum standards for a lease that mightn't be covered on a normal commercial lease.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And there's more disclosure obligations.
Absolutely.
So what have we got to do to disclose for that sort of lease?
You have to, first of all, prepare a lessor disclosure statement. And they're really important because the lease has to reflect what's in the lessor disclosure statement. If it doesn't, and something's missed, then the tenant can refer back to the lessor disclosure statement and possibly get out of the lease.
Okay, so now I'm hearing not only have we got minimum standards and requirements, but if we don't get certain things right in retail shop leasing, there's problems for the landlord and possibly the tenant.
Absolutely.
Okay, and there's termination rights?
Yes, there is.
Okay, so we've got to get that stuff right, and we need to know whether it's retail or commercial. And how do we know if it's retail or commercial?
Well, generally, if I've got instructions, I will go on the website, search the property, Google Earth it so I can see what it actually is. I do a title search to determine if it's going to be a strata lease, retail, or whole of the lot. Usually, if it's in a shopping centre, that's a given. It
Okay.
is retail.
So that's important too. Is it strata? Is it the whole of the lot, or is it part of the lot? So they're all different as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're getting really complicated. But let's think about the retail shop lease for a minute, because the retail shop lease, as I understand it, and you always tell me every day, that there's certain uses that are out and out retail. And if you have that use, you're a Retail Shop Lease Act.
That's right.
So what would some of those be?
If there's a Retail Shop Lease Act is if it's in a shopping centre or a complex, or if it's a strip centre that has 5 shops or more. If you have 5 shops but 3 of them are not retail, then likely it's not going to be retail. The Act itself has a list of exactly what is retail and what is not, but it also you have to work out where the premises is.
Okay, so now I can see where your 15 years of experience is coming in. So we've got a list of specific businesses which are just absolute retail.
Yes.
And if you're one of those, you're in the Retail Shop Leases Act. But even if you're not one of those, and you're in a shopping centre or a strip with 5 or more retail businesses, you're also a retail shop, even if you're not on the list.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so now I know, well, we've got to get that right. What other things come out of being a retail shop lease? What about fees?
That's where I think it's unfair, because the landlord has to pay our fees. The tenant doesn't have to. If it's commercial, the tenant has to pay our fees. With the retail leases, though, often we find that once the lease goes out to the tenant solicitors, then there's heaps of amendments. Then we have to go back to the landlord and say, look, there's extra fees.
Okay, so a landlord can't pass on their fees on a retail shop lease, but on a commercial, industrial, etc., they can.
That's correct.
Wow, there's so many differences between these when you drill down on it. Tell us about, because this comes up quite a bit and I'm interested in it, and I'm sure our viewers are, where you're going to lease something that's not yet built. How do you do that? Surely you can't sign a lease for a piece of land where they haven't built the factory yet.
No, you would do an agreement to lease.
Okay, what's that?
An agreement to lease sets out all the rules of what the lease is going to have, and a lease is done as well and attached to it. So the agreement is an agreement between two parties to say that, yes, we'll build this and you will lease it, and this is what it's going to entail.
So that sounds like a pretty complicated document, because it's going to detail what the landlord's going to build, when they're going to build it, and when they're going to hand over the premises to the tenant, and then the
Yeah.
tenant's got to do a fit out.
Yes, that's right. So there'll be a handover date, and then the handover goes over, and then the tenant will commence its fit out. And then it depends on whether the fit out's completed as to when they commence, when the lease comes into play, which is usually when they start trading or the day after their fit out is done.
Okay, so we've got the premises getting built, then we've got a fit out to be done by a tenant, and then sometime around the end of that fit out, or the first day they start trading, the actual lease starts. And with these agreement to leases, the lease is actually already attached. So once we get to that point, we don't have to negotiate again, and we just get started on the lease.
That's right. That's all done previously. So the lease comes into play, and that is what it is.
So Lisa, tell me, what would your top tips be to someone who's going to instruct OMB to prepare a lease for a property that they own? What sort of information can they get together to give to us to make the process smoother and a little bit cheaper, because we're not going to have to spend as much time chasing down all the details?
We have a lease instruction sheet, which generally, if I get an inquiry about a lease, I will send them the instruction sheet, which lists out all the terms of the lease. Then I call them and run through it with them. I explain to them what retail, commercial, we run through everything with them. So they've got a fair idea.
So if you're interested in protecting your property, because that's where the value in leases is, protect your property and your tenancy, contact us at OMB Solicitors. Lease can send you a lease instruction sheet, fill out all the information and get it back to us, and we can get the lease prepared. What are our turnaround times?
Usually 2 days we try for.
That's pretty
We're
good.
pretty fast, yeah.
Fantastic. All right, well, Lisa, I really appreciate you taking the time talking to our audience today on the OMB Law Board. I think the information you've given us about leases, agreements to lease, the Retail Shop Leases Act, and the differences and why it's important to identify that information up front has just been really valuable. So thanks for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks.